This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Heavy fighting reported in Afghanistan's Panjshir province as the Taliban prepares to name a new government. The UN calls for an immediate end to violence as rival armed groups clash in Tripoli. And fighting vaccine inequality. European countries to return COVID-19 vaccine doses shipped from South Africa. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche with your business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. South African power utility Eskom considers carbon capture at power plants to transform the coal-burning utility. And Ethiopia's economy shows promising growth despite many challenges. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Let's begin in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is expected to soon announce a new government. One of the group's founders, Abdul Ghani Baradar, is widely expected to be named as leader. Baradar headed the Taliban's political office and is expected to be joined by other senior figures such as Mullah Muhammad Yaqub, a son of a late leader of the Taliban. Meanwhile, heavy fighting has reignited between the Taliban and opposition fighters in the Panjshir Valley north of Kabul. Former President Hamid Karzai has urged the two sides to embrace peaceful negotiations. Meanwhile, a small group of women protested in front of the presidential palace in Kabul, demanding their rights be respected.
On the Taliban, they include women in their government. Women form a majority of the population of Afghanistan. If they are not included in areas like education, health, and politics, and don't have a role in these areas in our society, the world will not recognize us.
Right, let's turn to news now from North Africa. Fighting has broken out in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Two militias involved have been identified as the 444 Brigade and the Stabilization Support Force. The two groups have been pushing to control various parts of Tripoli. It is the heaviest confrontation since the conflict between eastern and western factions paused a year ago. The United Nations mission in Libya has called for an immediate halt to the fighting. No casualties have been reported so far. CGTN's Adel Al-Mahroui is standing by now with the latest developments on Libya. Adel, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, what more do we know about these clashes in Tripoli?
The clashes took place earlier on Friday at around 2:30 a.m. local time in Libya. It started with some clash fires. About medium and light weapons were used in this clash that extended until after sunrise. During that time, the brigades, all of Tripoli, actually could have hear the clashes that was ongoing for quite a long time. As you've mentioned briefly, it involves the 444 Brigade, which is one of Libya's quote-unquote military facilities. It's mainly involved by militias. According to the Tripoli Military Command, which is sort of a military force responsible for the overall military operation in Tripoli, this was the body that clashed with the 444 Brigade. And it claims that some of the leaders within the 444 Brigade were not from the military background. Some of them took about 10 million dinars of money and fled to Turkey, and they tried to maintain control over that brigade to make sure that it doesn't operate on its own. So basically, what is happening right now is sort of an attempt by some military or militia forces in Libya to try to gain control of the rest of the militias, and it has been ongoing for on and off within each regions, specifically in the west where militias are way out of the government control. And now there are some steps that try in Libya to try to get control and make sure that all of them follow certain orders, which is one of the biggest challenges in Libya. And actually, it was highly expected that when the move to unify these forces, or at least maintain control over it, begins, there will be clashes, as they have lots of weapons and lots of cash as well, which they will probably lose, of course, if they follow a certain unified command. So it's one of Libya's biggest challenges, is to maintain control over these militias.
And of course, the timing is a bit worrying too, Adele. The country is preparing for elections in December. How do these kinds of clashes and disagreements affect the country's peace process?
Well, yes, any military action will affect the upcoming elections. That it infuses and fuels instability in Libya. It gives a sign that Libya is not ready to hold an election safely and securely. And this is one of the major challenges that the elections is facing. Add to that the political instability and the rivalry between Western and Eastern politicians who up until today have not agreed on holding the elections on time. They have not agreed on what elections to hold, whether it be the presidential alone, the parliament alone, which will precede which, or will they do a referendum, a constitutional referendum at first. And they have also not agreed on the laws that regulate which election will be held. So it is a very complex issue politically, and even on a peaceful negotiation basis, it is very complicated. Add to that the military instability, the clashes between militias, and the security threat that any Libyan would go to the ballot could face. So this is a great risk, and this is why the UN says it's extremely alarmed, and it believes this is a grave concern, the recent developments that we've seen today in Tripoli.
Oh, thank you so much, Adel Al-Makrawi, live for us there in Cairo. Let's turn to news now from Nigeria, where 5 of the 73 students kidnapped on Wednesday by unknown gunmen in the country's northwest Zamfara state have been freed. Nigerian authorities say they are still trying to rescue the remaining victims, as well as hunt down the criminals behind the attack. Our correspondent Phil Ihaza has more from the country's capital, Abuja.
The 3 students have been reunited with their families after receiving medical assessment. According to the Zamfara State Police Command, the return of the 5 students was as a result of a pursuit of the abductors by security operatives. He did not give further details. The command also assured residents that the remaining abducted students will be safely returned to their families. But there are conflicting accounts. One local official says the girls managed to escape while the abductors divided all the kidnapped students into 2 groups, possibly to avoid being easily tracked by security agents. The abduction of the Kaya students from the government day secondary school is the latest in a series of mass school kidnappings in the northern region. More than 1,000 students have been kidnapped since December last year. The state government has imposed a dusk to dawn curfew across the state and ordered the immediate closure of primary and secondary schools as a way to tackle the issue of kidnapping in the state. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Well, let's take a look now at the latest on the coronavirus pandemic on the African continent. An arrangement in which Johnson & Johnson was packaging COVID-19 vaccines in South Africa and later shipping those doses to Europe has now been suspended. While announcing the suspension, African Union envoy Strive Masiwa said all vaccines packaged by Johnson & Johnson's South Africa partner Aspen and which were already sent to Europe will now be returned. The arrangement between the 2 pharmaceutical companies had drawn criticism on the continent, since Europe has very high vaccination rates, while most people in Africa are yet to be vaccinated. Well, every hour, 26 Africans die of COVID-19 in the continent's 3rd wave of infections. That's according to the World Health Organization's Africa director. The WHO warned that Africa is likely to miss the global goal of vaccinating the most vulnerable 10% of every country's population by the end of this month. CGTN's Wokista Nyabwa reports.
New data from the WHO shows that 42 of Africa's 54 countries are set to miss the target if the current pace of vaccine deliveries and vaccinations continues. 9 African countries have already reached the global target set in May by the World Health Assembly.
Among those are the island nations such as Seychelles and Cabo Verde, countries that have rolled out vaccines strongly from the start, such as Morocco, and countries where the uptake is rapidly increasing, like South Africa. Many of these countries are in the upper middle or high income brackets and have procured vaccines directly from manufacturers, as well as receiving various vaccine supplies. For lower income countries that are relying mainly on donations, the situation is more dire.
While many African countries have ramped up COVID-19 vaccinations as vaccine shipments increased in August, 26 countries have used less than half of their COVID-19 vaccines. To date, Africa has received over 143 million doses of vaccines, but only 39 million people, about 3% of Africa's population, are fully vaccinated. In comparison, 52% of people are fully vaccinated in the United States of America and 57% in the European Union.
Several countries are moving to vaccinate populations above 18 years and using retired nurses and nursing students, as well as partnering with the private sector to reach targeted populations. Vaccination points are also being expanded for people in hard-to-reach areas. I encourage more countries to use micro-planning to guide vaccinators on where and when to provide vaccination services and to inform communities of how they can access these vaccines.
Over 5,500 deaths attributed to COVID-19 were reported on the continent in the week ending on 29th August. The highly transmissible Delta variant has been found in 31 African countries. While African countries are putting in place systems and hubs to produce vaccines locally, experts warn that in order to fast-track the global recovery from the pandemic, international solidarity remains key. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN.
Well, let's return now to our coverage of the situation in Afghanistan. What we do know is that the Taliban is preparing to announce a new government, but also there is fighting taking place north of Kabul in the Panjshir Valley. Let's get to the latest now. We're joined by CGTN's Zamaria Lai Abbasan, live for us in Kabul. Zamaria Lai, just catch us up on the latest developments. Tell us about the fighting in Panjshir province.
Hello there. The situation is now, you can hear at the background, there are shootings aggressively and continuously. Hundreds of bullets and thousands of bullets are being fired since last 30 minutes, and the situation looks celebrating for the Taliban. It's not clear yet whether it's about the victory in Panjshir province or the Taliban have taken Panjshir Valley, or there is something else which the Taliban are celebrating at this moment. Yet we cannot confirm the situation, but it's a celebration, and you can just hear over the sky of Kabul there are a lot of bullets being continuously fired by the Taliban in every part of Kabul city.
And so tell us then about ongoing efforts to try and restart operations at Kabul's international airport. What more can you tell us about efforts to try and bring some sort of normalcy back to Kabul?
Well, I cannot tell you. We will talk about the Kabul airport issue. There were issues, and the Qataris and also UAE have been involved in technical affairs. There have been 3 flights to Mazar-e-Sharif from the UN, and also today 1 flight from Kabul to Mazar-e-Sharif by Ariana. And Afghanistan Civil Association authorities said that they will be continuing normal flights and civil flights. But at the moment, the situation looks very aggressive, like the bullets are being shot everywhere, and that's why you can see how I look like, because no part in Kabul looks like without bullets, and it's now getting less, but there was much more shooting and still continues. It's a celebration for the Taliban, yet not clear for what purpose.
Very well, we do hope that you stay safe there. Zamaria Lai Abbasan, live for us there in Kabul. Now let's turn to news from South Africa. The country's health minister, Joe Phaahla, has assured South Africans that at this stage, the C1-2 COVID-19 variant is not a threat. Local scientists, however, say the new variant detected in South Africa in May has a concerning set of mutations. They say the mutations could help the virus spread or evade the immune system's defenses. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The C12 variant has been detected in at least 8 of South Africa's 9 provinces. South African researchers and scientists are now trying to determine whether the C12 strain has an advantage over the Delta variant. The highly transmissible Delta variant drove South Africa's third wave of infection.
At this stage, they've assured us it's not really a threat. They've just observed it, they are watching it, it's just been picked up. What is almost certain is the fact that from the experience we have had since last year, it's almost given that there will be another wave somewhere down maybe by the end of the year or wherever. So that's why we need to speed up our vaccination, encourage more and more people to come forward.
Just over 20% of the adult population here has been fully vaccinated. Dr. Patla says the government will soon introduce ways to incentivize those who have not been vaccinated. But he also emphasized that no one will be forced to take a jab.
It's not our priority to even start thinking about some kind of legislation or regulation which says every adult must vaccinate. Our priority is to mobilize and convince people to come forward voluntarily and take the vaccine. That's really our main thrust of our strategy, is to speak to people, explain to them whatever their fears, and be able to deal with those fears so that they can come on their own accord.
Initiatives to encourage those who are hesitant to vaccinate are also set to be introduced.
For instance, in terms of the fact that people are hungry for entertainment, for music festivals, to go to Orlando Stadium across here to go and watch a soccer match. So what we are exploring is the possibility where, with some kind of confirmation that you are vaccinated, we could start opening up various activities, sports, cultural, and business, and more business, and other, kind of get-togethers.
The health minister also announced that the government will be looking at easing lockdown restrictions over the next week. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. The DRC says 12 people have died after an Angolan mine spilled toxic waste into rivers. And the UN warns that climate change is fueling conflict and displacements in Somalia. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Let's head to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the government says a tailings leak from a diamond mine in neighboring Angola has left at least 12 people dead and 4,500 others sick. The poisonous substance was emitted from the Katoka diamond mine from July. Local officials say the leakage also affected fish in DRC's Chikapa River in Kasai province, leaving the local population with no source of clean water. The Katoka mine produces 75% of Angola's diamonds and is managed by Sociedade Mineira de Katoka. The company previously said it had taken the necessary steps to minimize the flow of poisonous water into rivers. DRC says it will seek compensation.
The fact that the Angolan government recognized what happened at Katoka and that Katoka Mining also recognized the spill, for us it is good. Now we're at the assessment stage. I can't give you the costs now because of the limitations of my mission, which was sampling, research and such.
Well, earlier we spoke to our DRC correspondent, Chris Ochamringa, for more on this.
I spoke to an official at the Angolan embassy in the DRC earlier today, and he said that they are fully aware of the severity of this disaster and that the Angolan government is currently holding talks with their counterparts in the DRC to see how to resolve this matter amicably. The mining firm, Katoka, admitted that this incident happened. Last week they said it was an accident, but the DRC authorities, the Minister of Environment, says that admission is good, but it's not enough. They need to compensate them. They're saying 12 people died and more than 4,000 others fell sick. There was a lot of fish that died in that river, Kasai, and so they want some compensation. Now, the government of the DRC says they're sending a team of experts from the Ministry of Environment and other scientists to go to that area to see how to resolve this matter so that the people can be compensated. The official I spoke to did not want to divulge the exact actions that the Angolan government will take, but they said they are fully aware of the seriousness of this matter and that they will find a solution with the DRC authorities.
At a major trade fair underway in Beijing, industries from tourism to elderly care have been embracing technology. Several companies at this year's China International Fair for Trade and Services are showing how digitization is changing lives. CGTN's Sunye has more.
This is no regular aisle. This one says I'm perfect in my speed, in my balance, in my gait.
It's easily one of the most popular walks at the service trade fair, and it's digitally enhanced and tailored for the elderly.
It gathers relevant info with 3D sensing and then compares notes with the database. The results will help to dole out more to-the-point nursing care plans.
The company is bringing 8 digital solutions to the fair, including ones that will upgrade highway maintenance. Qianxing is showing how it plans to provide digital security for the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. And the Palace Museum, perhaps China's most venerable establishment, is also getting in touch with its digital side.
And in the Digital Palace Museum, you can go into places that you're not normally allowed to and look really closely.
720,000 square meters of the Palace Museum have been captured in full 3D and are now available online. You can enjoy the whole Palace Museum from the comfort of your home. But it's all about better cultural preservation. Cultural heritage sites face all kinds of unforeseen damages, so it's crucial that we keep digital records of the relics.
And with that, even the 600-year-old palace has stepped into a digital future. Sunye, CGTN, Beijing.
Zambian economic experts say there is a need to build strong capabilities in the digital economy to counter shocks brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. This in response to Chinese President Xi Jinping's speech at the Global Trade and Services Summit in Beijing. The president said that China will share its technological development achievements and promote world economic recovery and growth.
With the direction that President Xi is taking, we have seen the impact of COVID without a very strong digital economy, where the global economy was literally shutting down. So this is a lesson into the future, that for us to be able to withstand the shocks that we experienced in the COVID era, which we still continue to experience now, the wheels of the economy should continue to be turning. That can only be feasible if we build very strong capabilities in the digital economy. So I think that is the right way to go.
How these technologies can be used to really improve the way we operate today, I think that China is going to be playing a very, very significant role in this respect. And this is going to impact on travel, it's going to impact on tourism, it's going to impact on manufacturing, it's going to impact even on exploration.
Well, let's bring in Jude Moore, Senior Policy Fellow at the Center for Global Development. He joins us from Washington, D.C. via Zoom. Welcome to the program, Jude. Let's talk more about building digital economies. How can African countries leverage on ongoing trends to fight extreme poverty?
Again, thanks for having me. I think we've already seen that happen a lot. During the coronavirus outbreak, during lockdowns, a significant amount of trade and went online, became digital. So we're seeing that expanding. We're seeing health services, we're seeing financial services happening. I think the next thing that needs to happen for more expansive growth in that sector is to drive down the cost of data. So Malawi, which is one of the poorest countries on the continent, has the highest cost of data. If we want to continue to drive down, to expand services to people and reduce poverty, we need to make data accessible so that the digital economy is more accessible to the average African person.
And Jude, what then is the importance of international cooperation in enhancing innovation?
Yes, this is a really good question. So yesterday there was a story in VOA about Nigerian students who participated in this Huawei challenge. And when they went to China, they were able to see their Chinese counterparts engage in things that were not available to them in Nigeria. These kinds of international cooperation and exchanges actually allows for the diffusion of technologies so that African startups, African engineers can actually learn the skills as it expands in the economy. So as long as they're interacting with software engineers and firms from other countries, say for example, China, it actually helps in growing the capacity of the African tech sector. So this is really, really important.
Jude Moore, thank you so much, joining us there live from Washington, D.C. Now, tensions over shrinking resources are fueling displacement in Somalia. That's according to the United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Office. The country's climate crisis has been worsening and has made current conflicts worse while contributing to new ones. Let's take a look.
This is one of the many camps for internally displaced persons in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. It is where Ali Mahmoud Gaal and a growing number of IDPs now reside. He fled his home after militia forcefully took his land.
I fled from Eldere in Galgudud region. I had an agricultural farm and 4 other pieces of land. I had been living there since the Siad Barre government days, but we were forced to leave everything we had behind. We were attacked by an armed militia. We faced a lot of problems. We walked on foot to Mogadishu.
Many in Somalia are victims of insecurity linked to food and water scarcity. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs attributes the current situation to shrinking water bodies. The recent locust invasion and lack of fertile land have also contributed. All this are connected to climate change.
I've had an opportunity to travel through many parts of Somalia, and what's so concerning is the number of very vulnerable Somalis who've been displaced due to drought. This year alone, we have over 537,000 people who've been displaced, majority due to conflict. But as you've highlighted, the drought is contributing towards the conflict in many parts of the country, and this is mainly due to the increased tensions over scarce resources such as water, and which is of course exacerbated already alarming levels of vulnerabilities.
Eldere is rich. It is the most fertile in the area. We had farms. It was a good place to live. A beautiful town with good people, but no one can be allowed to live there if they don't belong to the local clan.
Somalia's agriculture sector has been adversely affected by years of conflict. But now, climate refugees are on the rise as successive droughts and floods ravage vulnerable communities. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
Well, here's Uche now with your latest business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. South Africa's power utility Eskom considers carbon capture at its power plants to transform the coal-burning utility. And Ethiopia's economy shows promising growth despite many challenges.
The East China Sea, home of dream seekers, where China's hub for reform and opening up connects with the maritime Silk Road. Whether it's exploring the busiest seaport and trade zone, or witnessing how locals strive for a better life. Join CGTN's adventure, Tides of Change Part 2. A journey enchanted by a dynamic ocean and beyond.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in South Africa, where the Eskom Holdings, the country's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, is now evaluating the use of carbon capture at its power plants. And that's all part of decarbonization plans to transform the coal-burning utility. Now, Eskom generates most of South Africa's electricity from coal. The utility, which reported a fourth straight annual loss earlier this week and is now struggling to deal with a mountain of debt, is turning to renewable energy to lower emissions and potentially receive better financing terms. Now, that shift will also affect the nation's coal mines and the communities that surround them. Moving to Nigeria now, the country's crude oil production fell by as much as 90,000 barrels a day to a 5-year low of 1.43 million a day in August. Now, this comes after Nigeria's crude oil exports also fell by 41.9% year on year in the first quarter of 2021. It's not all doom and gloom for Nigeria, though. On Wednesday, OPEC and its allies agreed to increase oil output by 400,000 barrels per day. That decision will boost Nigeria's oil output from about 1.4 million barrels per day to 1.8 million barrels per day come April next year. And the Tanzanian government says it has reduced the amount that it collects from citizens in the form of mobile money transaction levies by about 30%. The decision comes after weeks of public outcry over the levy. Now, the government of Tanzania has set a target of collecting $2.1 billion in tax on mobile money transactions over the next 5 years. Here's CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more.
After weeks of public disapproval and complaints, the government is making a change to mobile money transactions. It is cutting the amount it collects from citizens, slashing it by 30%. The finance minister says President Samia Suluhu Hassan is looking out for low-income Tanzanians.
The main aim is to ensure the rates are friendly so that citizens are not affected in their day-to-day activities. We know we have lots of young people, and this is where the president is looking at.
Many Tanzanians consider the amount being deducted as too high for many people in the country and felt it went against the government's financial digital inclusion agenda. The government has said it has so far collected about $27 million from the mobile money transaction levy, which kicked off on July 16th despite public disapproval. The new guidelines have been signed off and give a window of up to 7 days for mobile network operators to work on the programming of the new rates. The mobile money transaction levy was approved during the previous parliamentary budget session. The aim is to generate income for rural development and the improvement of infrastructure in the education sector. And this is just the start.
The President has instructed us to look at the whole revenue collection system. We should look at expenditure. We want to inspect the system to find cracks or leakages of public funds. I would like to assure our citizens that it's an area we are looking at.
The government says it also held talks with mobile service providers, and they too agreed to reduce their mobile money transaction rates by 10%. Citizens are divided on the issue.
Citizens were supposed to be consulted before this started. Plus, even with this reduced deduction, it still affects the low-income Tanzanian, because you say you reduced 30%. This means when being charged 2,000 shillings, you only reduce 300 shillings. The remaining 1,700 is still too high.
So I think the government should sit down, strategize again. There are better ways of accumulating money for the country, but I don't think that this was the way to go.
In short, with these reduced charges, at least the pain has been lessened for us who use mobile money a lot.
The government hopes that this move will continue to provide it with revenue to implement development projects, but also offer relief to Tanzanians, allowing them to carry out their daily activities with slightly less financial burden. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And heading to Egypt now, the country's new administrative capital city is a model of advanced technology systems. It is being built from scratch on the outskirts of Cairo. Now designed to hold 6.5 million residents, the flagship city is expected to open its gates to its first civil servants later this year.
Egypt will soon have a new capital on the outskirts of Cairo, a new city that will be a model of technological advancement, where residents will use smart cards and apps to unlock doors, make payments, and surf the web on public Wi-Fi beamed from lampposts. There will also be at least 6,000 cameras networked to monitor.
We want our citizens, through the mobile app with the new capital, to manage their whole life from their mobile phones.
Located a world away from parts of the existing sprawling capital, where creaking infrastructure can mean patchy internet and phone coverage. Officials say advanced technology systems will help to reduce waste by detecting leaks and faults.
We have the most modern applications for managing, for example, a criminal case. For example, the cameras we have are not simply surveillance cameras. That camera is like a security guard that is aware and is able to file a complaint.
Authorities plan to repeat and synchronize the technology through other developments championed under President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, for whom the new city is a flagship project.
So, in the sense, why have this smart city? Well, if there is any concern in the future that people might gather in the new capital city to protest, and that the Egyptians want to have another way to deter those kind of demonstrations and or to identify who might participate, this will help them. So that it does add that effect in terms of setting a certain set of conditions when it comes to who might actually protest or demonstrate in the new capital city.
This model is being applied in all the new 14 cities that are being established. Although some Egyptians see the new capital being for a privileged elite, in a country where nearly a third of the population live below the poverty line, others see the technological boost as long overdue.
First of all, it will save time and effort. It will save all the obstacles of routine, paperwork and archiving, things like that. It will also be modern. I saw these things in Europe in the 1990s. These things are all very useful to the citizen.
Technology and communications contracts for the new capital total $640 million, which could rise to $900 million in the later phase. Officials say surveillance technology would be aimed at detecting crime and enhancing safety, And that data will be protected by the Egyptian law and international standards. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And elsewhere in Egypt, the Great Sphinx of Giza has had company once again this year. Egypt's tourism industry has been starting a slow recovery since the beginning of the year. Although not comparable with pre-pandemic levels, visitors are now back and the industry is regaining some hope.
After 18 months of travel restrictions, tourists can once again enjoy the beauty of ancient tombs in Egypt. Tourism accounts for 9% of the country's GDP, but according to the tourism ministry, less than a quarter of the usual number of tourists visited Egypt in 2020, signaling a 55% fall in GDP. The industry had already suffered from instability in the country following the 2011 political unrest. But since the beginning of this year, authorities have started to regain hope.
Tourism is starting to recover. If we look at the pyramid or the Egyptian museum, we will find a very large occupancy rate, whether from internal or external tourism. Especially after receiving Russian tourism, we began to see very large occupancy rate.
Since the beginning of the year, Egypt has welcomed 300,000 tourists every month. By April, this figure rose to more than 500,000 a month, around 50% of visitors pre-pandemic.
We look forward in the second half of 2021, and after vaccinations began around the world, and the arrival of Russian tourism at Sharm el-Sheikh and Hakata airports, to recover a little bit until we reach the normal rates of the tourism sector.
The government is also making efforts. Tourism workers in the South Sinai and Red Sea governorates have been vaccinated. That represents about 2 million people in the country's most visited resorts. Zhang Mengyuan, CGTN.
And heading to Ethiopia now, the country's finance ministry says Ethiopia's economy has shown commendable growth in the face of the pandemic. Amongst other challenges has been the locust invasion and the domestic security challenges in the northern part of the country. Now, State Minister of Finance, Eyob Tekaleng, adds that the mining and export business are some of the sectors that have shown significant growth in the country. He further attributes the country's economic performance to the homegrown economic reform program that has been implemented across the economy over the last 2.5 years.
Prime Minister has been championing regional economic integration agenda over the past 3 years. So these working visits and interactions are a natural progression of the agenda that the Prime Minister has been championing that acknowledges that African states have to ensure that they're adequately addressing challenges which are considered important, and considering that enabling peace and security is also anchored in economic stability, the Prime Minister's integration agenda is crucial not only for the Horn region, but East Africa and the wider continent.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business. The DRC government says 12 people have died following a tailings leak from the Katoka diamond mine in Angola in July. Of course, all that coming up at the top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Rising water levels threaten the iconic flamingos in Kenya's Lake Nakuru.
Join us in Global Business. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Lake Nakuru has been ranked as one of the world's most colorful lakes. Its most popular attraction has been flamingos. However, in recent years, the birds had disappeared because of increasing water levels. CGTN's Wokista Nyabwa spent a day at the park and now brings us this report about the status of flamingos at the lake.
As the early morning chill slowly melts away, the animals at the Lake Nakuru National Park begin to stir, and another day begins in the wild. The park, a 2-hour drive from Nairobi, is home to some of the world's most majestic wildlife. But it's best known as a home for one particular type of bird. Mid-morning is the best time to spot flamingos in their numbers at the Lake Nakuru National Park. You will find them in the water foraging for the food that turns their plumage that distinctive pink. Let's go. Lake Nakuru alone was historically known for hosting more than 1% of the world's flamingo population. Pictures of thousands of flamingos feeding in or flying over the lake are among the best-known wildlife photos in the world. But these numbers have fallen greatly in recent years.
Or you can look at the cliff, and then you see where the water is at the deep.
Joseph Edebe is a scientist working for the Kenya Wildlife Service that runs the park. He remembers the years when about 1 million flamingos could be found feeding here. A census found only about 6,000 flamingos at these shores. In the last 10 years, floods have caused water levels in the shallow lake to almost double, upsetting its fragile ecosystem. To date, the park's main gate remains submerged.
Because of the increased rainfall, we have the water chemistry changing, it dilutes, and hence there is less food for the flamingos. And the flamingos move away because they follow the food.
The flamingos often migrate to other Rift Valley lakes.
In other areas where the flamingos move between, for example, Lake Elementaita, we recorded higher numbers of flamingos, about 70,000. And Lake Bogoria, there was about almost 100,000 lesser flamingos.
Lake Nakuru is also right next to Nakuru town, a fast-growing urban center with pressing demands.
It has a highly rapidly growing population, and so it has a challenge of solid and liquid waste pollution.
Despite this, hordes of tourists from across the world continue to visit the park. In 2011, about 250,000 tourists visited the park.
I've been longing for a very long time, really, to come see nature.
I've only been seeing flamingos in the TVs, but today it has been reality. I've just seen it here right with me.
With the pandemic, these numbers have reduced. Experts believe the key to safeguarding this phenomenon lies in protecting the water catchment areas and preserving this ecosystem. Already, they say, the water levels are falling. It's a promising sign of things to come. The birds are a world of wonder that has defied many threats to remain afloat year after year. Wokista Nyabwa, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, your sports news up next. Coming up, defending champions Tunisia reached the semis of the 2021 FIBA Afro-Basket Championship in Kigali, Rwanda.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.